Welcome to the Awaken on Purpose podcast, where each week you'll hear inspirational stories of heart-centered leaders who have awakened to their higher purpose and taken that leap of faith to follow their heart and make an impact in the world. Get ready to be enlightened, empowered, and transformed with your host, Jennifer Spohr.
To welcome as a guest to the show today, Mark Metry. He is a Forbes featured TEDx keynote speaker, the host of a global top 100 podcast, Humans 2.0, a podcast strategist. He's on Amazon Prime's The Social Movement docuseries, and he's now the author of his newly launched book, Screw Being Shy. Mark, I'm super excited to chat with you today. Welcome.
Jennifer, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to chat with you and your audience. Can't wait.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So let's jump right in to talking about your new book, Screw Being Shy. I had the opportunity to read your book, and I just want to say that there's so much wisdom that you shared in this book, not just the how-to in terms of how to move forward on one's path, but really just sharing your story as well. And I really feel like the title barely scratches the surface of the depth that you went into.
Yeah, Jennifer. So, for me, my purpose in life is to really just illuminate others, to set other people on fire. And for me, I personally believe that we were all kind of born with a problem, some sort of a hindrance, that each person has their own unique version of that. And for me, it's like, I believe that we're all born with that to sort of recover and find new solutions and then help other people who are also facing those same problems. And so for me, like, I grew up a solid decade of my life being really, really severely socially anxious. As a result, I didn't really have any friends, no legitimate relationships. And, I began to suffer in many other areas of my life, not just socially. And so thank God I kind of got out of this mess with me, eventually being suicidal at one point in my life. And I was just like, wow, like, I need to make this book, because it's not really necessarily even about social anxiety. It's not even necessarily about being shy. It's about, how do I give somebody a guide to guide themselves to almost like unlock themselves? Because I know for me, one of the big reasons why I began to tackle social anxiety was because it just wasn't enabling me to live my own life to myself and also to other people. And so, like you said, like, this book kind of goes in deeper, and this is my way of just sort of giving somebody a solution that can get to the root cause, that can help them find a sustainable solution for the rest of their lives. And it's not just about, 5 hacks that they can follow, or just very basic, maybe overly simplistic principles. And so for me, it's just like, how can I give this guide to someone and unlock their problems so that they can be doing what they actually want to be doing in the world? And so for me right now, that's social anxiety, but I'm sure in 10 years from now, it'll definitely change and take on other forms.
Absolutely. I love what you said about how each one of us is born with a problem, right, that we need to solve. I really believe that. I really believe that each one of us has a higher purpose, and that all of the experiences that we have in life serve that purpose. And by healing ourselves, we can heal others too. And I think that you and your journey, you're just such a fantastic and inspiring example of that.
Thank you, Jennifer. I mean, I think, I'm just trying to do my best, and I'm just really grateful that I am in the position where I'm in now, where I figured it out as early as I did. And I think that, I think everyone has sort of different versions of a problem and whatnot, but I think definitely dealing with something to a severity or to an extreme can almost just make you realize that contrast quicker, rather than someone, being in some pain with their problem, but trying to like delay it, trying to cope with it in unhealthy ways. and then making that process last for like, an extra 30 years. So it's definitely an interesting topic for sure that really relates to everyone, whether it's social anxiety or whether it's just a different problem or angle that you kind of view life from.
It really does. And a lot of what you include in the book can actually be applied across the board, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like for me, like I host a podcast. It's called Humans 2.0. It's all about self-development, self-improvement, mental health. And that for me is sort of what I view as the foundation, the root. And so, I've read hundreds, if not maybe like 1,000 by now, I don't even know, self-improvement books. And so I just kind of feel like through just, reading them again and again and again, I've just kind of learned like what makes a good book and what doesn't. And I've learned that books that provide just like very shallow solutions to rather with like sustainable solution. And so for me, like that's just how I view the world. And to me, social anxiety, like I said, it's like that was the problem that I had, but it's definitely not the only problem in life, and everything's connected. So
you mentioned meditation in the book as one of the key steps in moving forward in your development and your growth. Beyond just the practice of meditation itself, how does spirituality in your mind play a role in your personal development? We talk a lot about mental health and physical health, but we don't always touch on spiritual health specifically.
Yeah, so I think that life can be broken down into 4 layers. Physical, which is like basically the material world, emotional, mental, and then spiritual. And so I think if you look at that, at the very bottom, the foundation, I think, of everything in life is the spiritual dimension in which we all live in, but yet physical reality is sort of just showing us the visual representation of that right now in this moment in time by using the 4 different dimensions. And so for me, I think that when we are born into the world, I think we sort of go from like this purely spiritual dimension of life, and we are now into the physical dimension of the world. And I think, ever since we are born, we grow and evolve. And, I think everyone's primary goal is to be successful, whatever, they have defined that to be, whatever they believe that to be. And so I think a lot of the times, like, we can reach a material level of success. We can reach an even emotional level or a mental level. But I think until we are able to realize that material wealth, that material success is not actually what's going to sort of move the knobs and levers of life, but it's actually the spiritual world. And so when it comes to your question or the perspective that you offered on meditation, I think that ever since that we are born, like I said, from the spiritual world into the physical world, we're constantly making these connections. We're constantly making these connections of like, if I get a good grade, then that means I will receive my parents' love and I will be loved. Another connection is like, if you're in some sort of a toxic relationship, for example, and, you get down that route of always doing the same toxic behavior with someone, that can form a connection of like, when I am angry, that actually means I'm seeking love. And so, I mean, there's 1,000 different ways to think about it. But at the end of the day, I just kind of view it like these connections are like a wall adapter that you're charging your phone to. The wall is the outside world, is the external physical world, and the phone is you. And that comprises of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And so we make these connections all throughout our lives like that. Some of those connections are right, quote unquote, and some of those connections are just wrong. They're false. Or maybe they worked well for us in a different part of our lives, but now we're living in a new season. And so I think when you meditate, and there's a lot of different ways to meditate, but you essentially close your eyes and you shut yourself off from that physical environment. And I think when you begin to do that and you begin to focus in on your internal world, you begin to slowly but surely disconnect these connections that shouldn't be there. And so I remember for me, like when I was meditating, I literally began to become a different person. And I was actually just becoming more of myself, my true self. And, I'm super glad that meditation is now sort of becoming popularized and in the mainstream for sure. But I also think a lot of people, are maybe viewing it in the lens of it being like a high performance tool, which it is. And I think it definitely does, relieve stress, and it does make you more focused. But I think those are just like sort of like the scientific benefits behind it. But I think there's a lot more that we can uncover in terms of helping us bridge the gap and get closer to that spiritual plane, which I believe sort of we all come from and begin in life, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it makes complete and perfect sense. What you're saying. Meditation is something that changed my life. I mean, it was a complete game changer. I if there were a picture definition in the dictionary of someone who was in a high stress corporate, career, it was me, at one point. And I was probably the epitome of someone who did not ever make space for themselves, just especially in today's day and age with the technology and the high stress and external expectations from, society and career and the world, just that kind of pressure that people can put on themselves. And once I started doing meditation as a regular practice, I mean, it really changed my life. It all but almost completely eliminated my own anxiety. So it's a pretty powerful practice. I really can't sing its praises enough, to be honest.
I was literally just about to say, like, I think I could probably write a book on meditation, which it's benefited my life alone. So I'm totally with you. I think meditation is like a habit. Again, there's no such thing as a universal prescription for everyone, but I think meditation is one of those few things that, like, if you tell anyone to do, like, alongside maybe like a couple other things, I think they're going to get pretty far, regardless of what they do and even who they are. So it's interesting.
Absolutely. A couple of other things that I'd like to briefly touch on that I'm interested in having you share your perspective on is in your book, and I'm not spoiling the reader's experience or anything, but something key to touch on is when you talk about responsibility versus fault. So in our ability to move forward on our growth path, right, on our journey, one of the key components in moving forward is radical acceptance. It's not giving up, but it's more or less acknowledging where we're at and taking responsibility for where we're at. So there's a distinct responsibility, a difference, between responsibility versus fault. I'd love for you to elaborate on your point of view there.
Yeah. So, a critical piece that I've had to learn through, again, just trial and error, just through thinking that I'm so powerless in life. And it's really this concept of the fact that you are responsible for your existence itself, for everything in your experience, whether or not it's your fault. And, I think that when you really look at a lot of our problems, they can come down to a lack of ownership, because you cannot change something if you don't own it. And I remember for me on my journey, that was such a foreign concept. Like, the fact that I should accept myself or take responsibility for myself seemed totally crazy. And the reason why is because, all throughout this time in my life, I just sort of thought that I was like this that I was like this super weak fish that was just sort of swimming on its, kind of like on its reserves. And, and when you're a weak fish like that, you don't really have any power. You get hit in the ocean. You're at the whim of the waves in the sea. You're at the whim of bigger fish that might push you around. And so that for me is sort of what I viewed my life as before. And, eventually through falling down my own dark path and getting out of it, I realized that a big part of that was nobody's going to come and help save me from myself, really. And then even if you factor in like anything that you could possibly do, whether that's like, go seek professional help or go hire a meditation teacher or go to a yoga class, those are all helpful, very helpful things for sure. But at the end of the day, it's like if you yourself, your consciousness, the thoughts behind your brain and your feelings, if they don't actually want you to, move forward, then you won't. And for me, a critical piece on my journey was just realizing the difference between responsibility and fault. I was kind of looking at my past and I was like, wait, is it really my fault that these things have happened? And the answer is no. Fault and responsibility are two totally different things. And unfortunately, I think our society just hasn't really been taught that. And I think another big thing is that, and this is from my perspective as someone who's pretty young, as someone who's like 22. And I've talked to a lot of people my age about this, and a lot of them agree. But this is just sort of my personal opinion. It's that, I really do think that because of how great the world has gotten, because of how, how prosperous we have gotten, and how we try to nerf the world for good intentions to try to help younger people before us, there's like this big BS cloud that's hovering over a ton of young kids in my generation today, of just hearing their parents and other adults say, hey, it's not your fault. 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 And they're totally right. Like, it's not your fault. I just said that. And I think responsibility can sort of get confused and get caught up into that, because essentially, we turn on the TV, we see whether it's governments or corporations doing a ton of things. And we think like, we can't possibly change anything about this world. So I'm just going to sit back and let the adults in my life and let the authority figures help me and do these things for me, because it's not really my fault. So that to me is something that really, really is hurting young people in their mindset, because it's stopping them from taking responsibility. And, I think a big prerequisite to taking responsibility in your life is by literally becoming responsible, because it can be a very scary and an unknown and daunting thing to, take responsibility for your life, which means that you can't necessarily be, messing around with this other part in your life, because when you take responsibility and you've never done that before, that can be very scary and deter someone from doing that. So that's usually the way that I kind of think about it.
What you're sharing isn't just an issue in your generation. I believe, and based upon my own experience, it transcends generations. There's such a huge cloud of confusion out there in terms of what it all means, right? Fault versus responsibility. And there can be such a victim mentality, and the longer that we stay in that victim mentality, the longer that we stay stuck. The key to moving forward is us, we don't have to condone our behavior, our past behavior, or anyone else's, but what we do need to do is acknowledge where we are, and we also need to forgive. There's a huge power in forgiveness and our ability to move forward.
Oh man, there's a massive, massive ability. And, honestly, the way that I think about it is, you cannot, you cannot accept yourself if you don't forgive yourself. And you can't love yourself if you don't accept or forgive yourself. And if you don't love yourself, then you cannot develop yourself. You cannot change yourself. And so for me, that's the way that I look at it in terms of acceptance and changing. It's like, if you cannot forgive yourself, then you will never be able to accept yourself. And if you can't accept yourself, then you'll never be able to love yourself. Why would you possibly put in an ungodly amount of work and hard work, which is very hard, into something that you don't love, let alone own? And so that to me is like the way that I think about it, because I think if we can get down to that and put that in our lives as a daily practice of forgiveness, I think can get us a lot closer to actually making those long-lasting changes and developments, and really just working on ourselves like a story, like a hero.
Absolutely. And I believe that we're eternal students. We're never really done learning. There's always a new invitation to mastery, right?
Oh, 100%. And I think the moment you lose that is the moment you lose in life. And I see a lot of people who, whether it's they think they get to a moment where they think they know everything, or they have enough money, they think, or, they've reached some time in their life where they have arrived. I largely think that's an illusion. I think for sure you can make a lot of significant progress on a lot of problems. But I think that if you are not embodying the mindset, the identity of a learner, then you are embodying the identity of the ego that thinks it knows everything, which is not actually who we are. And it's the survival part of our brain that does that and brings us scarcity level thoughts. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what I think about it, if that makes sense.
Right. And it's learning to discern, right? To tell the difference between our ego selves and our higher selves. And that's where I feel like learning how to recognize your intuition as guidance comes into play. And I could talk to you for a week about that, but but in the interest of time, I kind of want to, just say that your book does a fantastic job of addressing the mind, body, spirit connection that I know we touched on briefly earlier in our conversation. And this book is a fantastic guide, not just for someone who is shy, or someone who has social anxiety, or someone who is within a certain, generation or age range. I really feel like this transcends generations and conditions, and it can be a great guide for anyone who is serious about healing and continuing to move forward on their path, and therefore, in their ability to continue to contribute more in the world. So thank you for creating this book, and just for all that you're doing out there to make a difference. It is really appreciated.
Thank you, Jennifer. Honestly, that means a lot to me as someone who, this is my first book. And it's been great to of course, get like praise and endorsements from people who, are much smarter than me and are like New York Times bestselling authors and psychologists and neuroscientists. But I think it's especially cool to, I hope you don't see this the wrong way, but to hear that from a totally normal person, and we're all totally normal people too. But I think that to me is as valuable, if not probably more valuable than the other people who have read my book. So I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the kind words. And yeah, I hope it helps one person.
Thank you. Well, it's definitely going to help a lot of people. And the work that you're doing out there, like I said, you really are making a huge impact, and it's appreciated. Mark, if someone wants to learn more about you, we'll include links and everything to connect with you, but where is the best place for them to find you and for them to check out your book?
Yeah, so if you go to, place where you can check out everything is if you go to my website, which is just my first and last name.com, markmetry.com, you will see access to podcast, book, social media, content contact information, get in touch with me, all that great stuff. Would love to hear from you. And Jennifer, thank you so much for creating a platform like this to talk about these serious things in life.
Thank you. And I feel similar to you. You know, if this is helping even one person out there, it's worth it. And I think it's important for other people to hear about others' experiences, right? So that they know that they're not alone, because as different as each one of us are, you know, there's also a collective, right? A collective consciousness.
100%.
We really share so much in common.
100%. I totally agree. And yeah, I mean, it's great to make a connection with you. And you're such a wealth of information too, filled with wisdom.
Oh, thanks, Mark. I really enjoyed having you today.
Yeah, Jennifer, you're the best. Thank you, everyone out there, for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Awake and on Purpose podcast. Please visit us and subscribe to the podcast at awakeandonpurpose.com so you never miss an episode. To learn more about how you can connect with your higher purpose and take that leap of faith to make your impact in the world, visit us at jenniferspor.com. And while you're there, be sure to join our email list for exclusive offers and a weekly dose of inspiration.